right. My name is Princess Jeffries, and today I'm just going to talk about streamlining assessments, but with a focus on using the formative app slash website by Newsela. I have a lot of experience with this website. I use it within my last year of teaching. It was honestly a game changer and lifesaver. There's so many things that we have to do as educators, and we have to hit so many checks to be able to create quality assessment and to not only make them, to present them, and to use it for data. And there's so many steps in between that to have just one place to do it all was so time saving and just really completely made it effective. I'm going to go into just kind of what that process looks like. But first, I want to kind of look at why formative. I know that there's a million educational apps, a million educational websites out there. So why are we choosing to look at formative? Formative was founded with two goals in mind. One was to push the understanding of effective practices as educators, which honestly should be the goal for any educational app or website that you're using. But the second was what I think sets them apart, and that's to create something based on real teacher experiences. Not something that was taught in undergrad studies 20 years ago, not trending topics in education at the moment, not anything that textbooks are saying, but based off of current real teacher experiences. They even went through and did their own research study and had a whole study done on teachers and letting them use formative to its full extent and implementing them regularly and just seeing what does it do for teachers. And in that research, it was so positive. It showed that 92% of those educators said that it fit easily into their schedules and it improved efficiency. And if you ask any teacher what the most difficult part of creating assessments, using assessments, most of the time they're going to tell you it's time. There's just not enough time. No teacher is going to say, "Oh, I just have so much time on my hands." Time is always the problem. And formative helps compact that time and make your schedule just flow easier. And then not only that, but then 90% of those educators also believe that it was directly responsible to the improvement of overall student outcomes. So as they're able to use formative to push through their assessments, to provide a variety of question types to meet the diverse learning needs of students, that helps that overall student outcome. And then finally, 93% of those educators also believe that formative was an invaluable tool to add and use regularly within their classroom. In my own experience with formative, I used formative just about every single day. I taught middle school math, which is not an easy subject, especially for 12-year-olds trying to get them to happily come in and learn numbers, apply numbers. And then once we get into letters, it just rocks the world. But with formative, I used it daily and I used it for assessments. I used it for just kind of understanding, like check for understanding. Where are they at? I would use it for ungraded assignments. I would use it for bell ringers. I would use it for exit tickets. I would use it for end of module tests. I would use it for retakes. I used it for just about everything. And you're about to see why, because there's so many great features and tools within formative that make all of what I just went through so much easier. Now, quality assessment, you could say that you just assess your students, but what does it look like to have a quality assessment? That looks like having accurate reflections of student learning. There are so many times that I had given a test and I had a student who would get a C, and I thought, there's no way. That student is the one that's always calling out answers during my lectures. That's a student that is an A student on their assignment. So why did they get a C on their assessment? Maybe it was the assessment. So we're looking at something that's an accurate reflection of what they know, something that's fair for all students. It's not biased to where one group is going to do better than another. It's completely fair. And then it also has direct connections to learning objectives, to backwards design, which I'm sure most of us have heard about over and over again. But backwards design, we always come back to that because it works, because we make sure that we are connecting everything between our instruction and in our assessments to what our learning objective is. And a quality assessment also looks like something that you can reflect on. Is this giving me quality data that I can utilize for either re-instruction or further instruction? Now, in formative, there are multiple assessment types. I listed some of them earlier, some of the ones that I use, and these are just four of the most common used ones, and those are quizzes, polls, bell ringers, and exit tickets. In formative, you can create whichever assessment you want. any sort of assessment that you're trying to have, and you can facilitate those in real time. As students are getting those assessments done, you get to monitor their progress. Maybe Billy is still on question 3. Majority of the class is already on question 10. I should take a loop around the classroom and go check on him. Or whether, oh, I noticed that Sally over here got her assessment done in 3 minutes while everybody else is still halfway through it. So maybe I should go and check. Hey, maybe you sure you don't want to go back through those questions one more time? And so that's such a great part of it. But as you're making those assessments, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm just excited. As we get into making those assessments, there's a variety of question types available, which I think is so great because as we think about standardized tests, as we think about the MAP, the EOCs, none of those just have one question type. There's multiple question types, multiple choice, constructive response, matching, tables, graphs. There's a ton of different question presentations. So as we go through formative also provides, hey, here's a variety of ways that you can present these questions to your students. And as you can see in the red box on my screen, it has some free questions and then it also has paid questions. Now there is a paid membership to formative. There's also a free version. The free version has plenty of great features. The paid version, as a teacher, I found it well worth my money. I didn't think it was very expensive at all. So I'll touch on some of those as well because there are also school memberships as well. But I'm going to go into some of those because I utilized a lot of those because they were well worth my money. The free questions, though, we've got drawing responses, we've got free responses. So if I just need students to be able to type something out, I've got multiple choice, which we all know is always going to be on the test at the end of the year. We have multiple selections. So getting students to know, hey, if it says select all of the following that apply, this isn't just a regular multiple choice. You're not just going to choose one. You might choose more than one. There's short answer for maybe if you're providing a reading passage and say, hey, summarize this in one paragraph. Let your students do that in a short answer. And then there's true and false. My favorite with the paid questions, coming from a math perspective, there was a numeric type where you're able to give students a mathematic calculator, and then they're also get a keyboard on their screen. So they get a little virtual keyboard on their screen where they can, if they need to type in an equation as an answer, if they need to use special symbols that aren't on a regular keyboard, they're able to use mathematical tools. And then what I also think is great is that there's matching, which I've seen pop up on map tests before. Same thing with drag and drop, categorize, just overall super great. And then there's also a filed response. So if students are to make a presentation and say, hey, I need you to attach this Google Slides that you made on, whatever historical event that you chose to cover, students can still respond through formative by having a file response. So just a lot of different question types. And I think that that's so great with not only just meeting students' needs, because they're all so diverse, but like I said, you're also setting them up for success when they get different question types on standardized assessments. Now, when it comes to assigning those assessments, you can choose 2 different modes. One, which is the most frequent and traditional method, is student pace mode. All you gotta do is just hit assign. Students can move through it at their own pace. They can go, backwards and go forwards. If you want to assign to all your students, you can. If you want to assign to just a group of students, maybe you have an intervention group of students that they just need a little bit extra practice. So we're just gonna make this one assignment for them. I can just assign it to this one class. Or maybe I've got 3 students out of my 50 that need to retake this test. I don't want to assign everybody a retake. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on those 3 students and I'm just going to assign them the retake, and it's not going to show up for everybody. So I love that you're able to pick and choose. It's not just a one click and it's generalized for everybody. It's truly individualized for students, and it helps the teachers meet those all of those little things that come up. It's not just oh, well, I can't do this, or I'm gonna have to go out of my way to go print an extra copy. It's, hey, we're still gonna keep it in this one platform. That way it's effective for you. That way it meets your students, and you're not having to go out and do the extra work, go find a new website, go print extra copies, and all the extra things. And then you can also schedule open and close times. So say you've got a sub coming in your room next Tuesday, you want to go ahead and make that assignment though, because you don't want to be doing that last minute. So you go ahead and make that assignment, but because you don't want students working ahead, you're going to go ahead and schedule it to be open at Tuesday at 6:30 in the morning. No student is going to be able to get it done or look at it until Tuesday, 6:30. Or maybe you have an assignment that you don't want your kids looking at it. You want that to be, this is just within a specific time frame. I'm not taking any late assignments. This is your one window that you get. I can close it at a specific time. I can close it at Thursday at 3 p.m. as soon as that last bell rings. And so there are just a lot of ways with assigning, just in general, just assigning that make this such a great tool to have. There's also presentation mode. You can present the questions and then you can have it up and just make it like a whole group experience. So this is often great whenever we're just working with trying to get all the students on the same page. You don't necessarily need to see where they're at individually, but we want to see what they can do when it comes to working with others, sharing their answers out loud in class, not exactly all on their own with a little bit of guided help, but then you can get an idea of, hey, am I ready to go ahead and let them see what they can do completely on their own? Now, some great tools that I think are in formative is one, hints. I think that hints are so great because it helps scaffold these questions. Sometimes we just need to give our students an extra push in the right direction, and hints are the perfect feature to do just that. When you're creating your assessment, whatever question you're giving, if there's a question that, oh, maybe I just need to give them a little bit of extra information, if they need it to push them in the right direction, maybe they just need that little bit of a hint, you can throw that in there. That way, especially if you have large groups, you're not running around the room in circles because every student has their hand raised. They're able to check on that first. And then if they need further help, then they might raise their hand and ask a question. But most of the time, that hint will help push them enough that they can jog their memory or they know which way to go. And I think that that's just so great, such a useful self-check tool for students as well, to not just rely on the teacher constantly, but to be able to use the resources that they have in front of them. Next is returning scores. I think feedback is such an important part in student learning. And with formative, you can choose how you want to provide feedback. With returning scores in your settings with your assignments, there's a return scores in the bottom, and that's in like a little red square or rectangle that I have down there on that image. And then there are four drop-down options on that menu. The first one says after the students submit. So maybe I'm presenting this assignment. I'm saying, hey, here's your daily homework assignment for today, and it's got 10 questions on it. If the student submits it and I have my settings onto here, then what's going to happen is as soon as they have it submitted, it'll show their overall score at the end, especially if there's automatic grading, if I'm doing multiple choice, or with ELA, if it's a vocabulary test and there's only one right word for the question, or maybe it's with math and algebra and there's only one right number. If I have a set key and it automatically grades it, then students can immediately see their score once they hit submit. Now, I could also have extra self-check and I could choose to return scores instantly. Returning scores instantly is going to look like as students are walking through those questions, as soon as they put an answer in, they don't even have to have their formative submitted. They get instant feedback on it. So if number three is asking students to find the area of a certain shape, and let's say that the area is supposed to be 32, but they type in 24, they're going to get a red circle. So then they can look back at their work and say, okay, well, I know that that was the wrong answer. So what do I need to do? Where did I go wrong in my work? And then once they put in the right answer, then the circle turns green for them and they say, okay, I know I did that one right. And I can move on from there. I always told my students when I would use instant feedback and instant return scores, I would say, hey, there's no reason that you shouldn't be getting 100% because you are getting to see as you go whether you're getting these right or wrong. And it's a great way, like I said, for students to self-check and to know, hey, I'm messing up when I'm doing this process, rather than doing the whole thing, turning it in and realizing, oh, I messed up and I missed half my questions because of it. Now, a lot of times I would do a pre-module check. I would do a pre-assessment just to see where my students were at. And I didn't really want my students to see those scores because a lot of times they weren't good. It was a pre-assessment. I don't expect them to know that knowledge. But if I want to know where they're at, I can just say, don't show scores. I want to be able to see those for myself. I don't really need them to see it. It's not a part of their grade. I don't want to discourage them by any means. So I'm just not going to show those scores. Or you can also choose to return scores when your assignment is closed. So maybe it's a test. And once you return those scores, you don't want students to be able to see which questions they got wrong, so then they can go tell their friends that are in the next class. Maybe you want everybody to wait until the assignment is all done and all closed up for every section, and then they can see their scores, you can do that as well. I just love how many options there are. And at first, formative might seem a little overwhelming, but once you figure out what works for you, what tools you need to use, because you don't need to use every single tool. That depends on your grade level, your content level. But once you figure that out, then you really get into the groove of what works for me, and then how do I make this work best for my classroom management, for what my students respond best to, and so forth. With feedback as well, as I'm grading, there's an option to leave comments, which I think is great because it gives students a notification. It'll pop up on their dashboard that, hey, your assignment 6.4 on the solar system, this got a comment on it. So then students can go and they can go look at their questions and notice in this example, it says that the student got 0.25, they got a quarter of the point that was possible. It says, which of the following were causes of World War I? And they just wrote imperialism. Now, in this example, there's a comment that says, hey, make sure that you provide more detailed explanations when you're answering your questions, try to expand. That way, you don't have to run after every student and try to catch up with them. And you don't have to remember it in the back of your brain. Oh, the next time I see them, I'm going to make sure to tell them, hey, don't forget to fix your answer on this. It's just instantaneous. As you're grading it, you just type your feedback, you hit send, it shows up for them. And then if you allow them to go back and fix their responses, they can go back and fix their responses to try to get more points. And so just a really quick, easy way to go ahead and get it all done while you're there. Like I said, there's no needing to write a little extra sticky note. There's no needing to wait a whole nother day until you have that student in class again. They can just see it right there and then on their own dashboard. Now, the other tool that I think is so great is just the way that they display their scores on formative. And if you look at this, and maybe you are a type A teacher and you love organization, this just might look like the best thing in the world to you. I love the color-coded overview that you get to see on formative. Now, notice, so this is just an assessment overview of student scores. And we've got 8 questions, and then we have all the student names there on that left-hand side. And then I get to see how each student did percentage-wise. Now, overall, I can see and I can get immediately notice some trends in my questions. I noticed that question number 1, my students nailed that one. Question number 8, most of my students nailed that one. Now, I've got my 2 middle questions, questions 4, 5, a little bit of 6. Those ones they didn't do so great on. So maybe I need to look at how I worded question 4. Was this a question error? If most students got this one wrong, was this how the question was worded? Did I mess up on the grading key? What set up students to not do as well on this one versus the other questions where they were set up for success? Or you're able to even look at individualized students and you can select a student's name. You can select a student, like a specific question number to see the student answers on it. You can see exactly how each student answered. For example, if I want to take a look at KCK, who's there in the middle-ish and got a 49%. If I want to take a look at what in the world did Casey answer on number 3, I can look at that and then I can leave a comment. And that's what that little gray speech bubble looking thing is on number 3 for KCK is, hey, I left a comment to let them know, hey, maybe you might want to redo this one. Or, hey, I need you to further explain your work on this one, whatever the feedback may be. But what's so great about this too is if you have multiple classes, if you have multiple sections, you can have each section assigned the same exact thing. And then on that very left-hand side, you'll have drop-down menus and you can see, this is my first hour. I'm going to drop down and see all my students in my first hour. All right, I'm going to pull that tab back up. Now here's my second hour. I can drop down my second hour and see how they each did. Or if I just want a generalized, very, very generalized view of how each class did, I can say, here's the top class, here's first hour. First hour got 78%. Second hour got 82%. Fourth hour, though, my fourth hour got a 50% average. So what is happening in fourth hour? Is it the way that that class lays in the middle of the day? Is it a specific few students? Do I have students in there that need more intervention? Was it the way that I taught it? Did I forget a piece of the lesson that day? And you're able to really reflect and instantaneously reflect on how did that go for the day? How did it look like for each individual class? Because every class period is going to look different, whether it's your students, whether it's the way that you instructed, And so you're able to reflect on that and then say, okay, maybe tomorrow I need to spend more time with my fourth hour class breaking this down because I don't think that they got it. Or maybe I missed a piece of the lesson. I need to make sure that I go back and give that piece to them so that they're able to find success. So whatever that looks like, the data highlights I think are just so cool in this, just the way that it lays it all out and lets you truly reflect on how it went and how your students are doing. What I also think is cool is, like I said earlier, you're able to see individual student responses. So let's say that I'm looking at question number one. I can see how every student answered question number one. And what I can also do is I can adjust points. So maybe there's just one right answer, or maybe there's three correct answers that it could be. I can go and adjust that question on the side, on that very right side there. I have the student's username, and then I have the question, but I also have this color-coded bar. It goes red, orange, yellow, green, and I can determine how many points they get. So maybe I want to give them partial credit. Maybe they got half of the question right, and I don't want to completely discount them for that, but they didn't get all of it, so I don't want to give them 100%. I can easily adjust that. I can slide that scale. I can type in a number and I can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to give them 0.5 of a point. I'm going to give them half a point for that one because I think that they got it partially right. And so I can go through, I can provide them that feedback once again, but I can also adjust scores as I see fit. Now, what I think is such a time saver, especially if you're in a district that is very heavy on let's use all the data we can find. I think that the standards alignment tools that are in formative are so helpful and time saving, and you always have data ready to pull up, even if you forgot that PLC meeting that you had at noon and you didn't have anything prepped. But if you already use formative, all you gotta do is hit print and your reports are right there. Now, with formative, you can tag your questions. All you got to do is whenever you create an account, it'll ask you, hey, what state are you teaching in? I'm teaching in Missouri. So you're going to use Missouri Learning Standards. Yeah. Hey, do you teach one specific grade? Do you teach one specific content? If I'm teaching sixth grade math, or if I'm teaching third grade science, or if I'm teaching whatever grade level and content area, I can select that standard set, and that way it's already linked to my account. So then as I'm making assessments, as I create a question, I can say, hey, I want to tag a standard to this, and it'll have this little tag button on the bottom of that question. And you can go in and you can start typing. Maybe I'm talking about Earth. So I'm going to start typing Earth. And then all of the standards that are related to my content area and my grade level, whatever state I'm teaching in, all of them pop up. So maybe in this example, it says, what is the largest living thing on Earth? Notice they already have their answer key there. They can accept the Great Barrier Reef or just Great Barrier Reef. But then they also are tagging in that standard. So, they've typed in Earth. So then they've got different standards that are coming up for Earth related to whatever state they're teaching in, or whether it's Common Core standards, national science standards. There are all sorts of standard sets that are informative that you can use to link. And then what's great about that is that as you go through and you get that data, then whenever you take a look at it, you can organize by standard. So maybe I just got done teaching four standards through the week. I'm doing an end of week check. I want to see how my students performed on them. I know that I have three of the standards that I just taught are priority standards that are going to be assessed on the MAP test. So I really want to focus on how they're going to perform on that. What I can do is after I give them that assessment and I'm looking at my data, I can organize it by my standards. So notice in this example, it's organized. That first standard is REA.B. And then you can see that questions 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8 covered that standard. And you can see overall, how did my students do on that? I go over to the next standard. The next standard there is RI point 6.10. And then I noticed that I've got different question sets for that one. I only have number two that hits that standard. And how did students do on that standard? And you can organize by standard type, and then you can see, man, if my students did really great on this one section of the standard, but they didn't really do too great on this one, I don't have to reteach the whole lesson. I don't have to reteach the whole unit. I don't have to reteach everything I just taught them this past week. Maybe I just need to reteach them one thing. And maybe that can get done in bell work. Maybe that can get done in during a small intervention period. Whatever it is, you can pinpoint exactly where your students need that intervention, where they need that extra instruction. And you don't have to go through and keep finding, okay, where do I need to reteach? Where do I need to reteach? Formative already has it laid out for you. What I think is great too is that you can also see how students individually did on those standards. This standards report is something that I used a lot whenever I would have to provide data, especially for PLC meetings, for just some checks to see how I was doing as an educator. And a lot of times in the district that I was working in, our mastery standard percentage was 80%. If your students can hit 80% on a standard, then we're going to call it good. So if I'm giving this assessment and we're going to take a look at this example here, I've got a lot of greens on there. But then what really stands out? What stands out is that question there that has 40% accuracy. That's standard L65A. As I'm looking at that standard, I see that there's a few students who got 0%. There's a student who got 50% on that. So is that something that maybe it's just those few students that need reteaching? Or if I have as low as an overall percentage as 40%, maybe I need to take a look at how I address that standard. Maybe I didn't address it as well as I thought I did. And so I just think that this is such a great tool to say, hey, overall, I think we did great, but it's just this one little piece that we're missing. And that's what's holding us back from reaching a true 90, 95, 98, even 100% on an overall assessment. And finally, what I think is so great too with just the features of the standards informative is whenever you can look at what's holding us back or what's keeping us from moving forward or what did students do great on, where are our wins and where are our losses. And formative has a great, very detailed breakdown of how students performed based on question type, based on the question itself, based on the standards. And so you can see that right here. Notice that we have an overall performance. We have a circle in that left-hand corner where it shows us that most of our students scored between 75 to 100%. We have some students that scored between 50 to 74%. And then we have a very small portion of students who tested between 0 to 24%. And then we also have that on the very side, so just to the right of that, we get to see a number of students. So if I'm looking at my numbers and I'm aiming for a specific number of students, I can see, okay, which students, that eight students that are in that 50 to 74% range, I want to look at those 8 students and I want to see what can I do to push them just to that next level. Or maybe I'm looking at standards once again. I think that schools have really been buckling down on standards, especially as we put a focus on priority standards. So as I'm looking at my standards that I tagged each one of my questions with standards. As I'm looking at that, I'm going to take a look at my standard tag down there, and I notice that my first standard listed MS PS21. Overall, we only scored 31% on those questions. We had 2 questions with those standards, but we only had 31% accuracy. But when I look at the rest of my standards, MS PS22, MS PS23, MS PS24, each one of those had 81%, 94%, 91%. I did great on those. My students performed great. So maybe I just need to take a look at that PS2 one and see what do we need to relearn on that. Then we can also look at item type. Maybe it's just an item type that's throwing them off. Notice on that bottom right, it shows us what different types of questions did we use. I used multiple choice, I used short answer, I used drawing, I used numeric, I used categorization. So then if my students are getting really tripped up on short answer, then I can say, okay, maybe we need to go back and I need to show students what's expected. When I give a short answer question, this is the kind of answer that I'm expecting. I know that my students are doing great when it comes to a drawing response. So I know that they can find success there, especially if it works for most of my students. And just being able to differentiate for your students on different question types. And then finally, you can go over and to that bottom left-hand side, we see underperforming questions. We always look for areas of improvement, and Formative goes ahead and highlights that for you. Says, hey, here are the 3 questions that your students missed the most. Now notice question 2 and question 1. I had over 20 students get those questions wrong. And I have a feeling that's probably going to be the standards that were tagged PS2 one. And so as I look at those, then I know that that's where we lacked, that's where we need to go back. And just it's truly just lays everything out there for me. That way I don't have to go through each individualized student's test, whether it's on paper, whether I used a different platform to provide it, and all the time that it would have taken me to say, okay, I'm noticing a trend as I'm going through each student's test, or I'm noticing this with different question types. It doesn't take me 15, 30, even 45 minutes to find the trend. All I gotta do is click a button and Formative has the trend for me. And so it saves so much time. It doesn't add another thing onto an educator's plate. It's not just one more thing you have to do. It's things that you're already expected to do, things that districts are already pushing you and asking you to do, except it's just doing the extra work for you. It's not cutting corners. It's not quicker assessments just because we're using technology to cheat a little bit. It's faster, but also effective quality assessment. And I cannot speak good enough things about formative, how much time it saved me, how much my students loved it. And even with having a routine of always going to formative, the variety of question types that I could provide, the variety of assessment types, whether I let them work in groups, whether it was a test, they always knew what to expect and they were able to get comfortable with it, get familiar with it. And then I was able to use that to push them to learn more question types, to push them to reevaluate, to be able to self-check for themselves. And so just these are just very surface level assessment-based features. There are so many more features on formative with instruction. You can upload YouTube videos, you can upload a text. There are multiple ways that you can use formative. This is just the assessment and data side of things. And I highly encourage if you haven't checked it out to check it out for yourself. So yeah.